What would you do if you woke up with the worst hangover in the history of humanity, with no memory and a brutal murder to solve? It's a question you've probably not asked yourself before. It would be weird if you had, but it's one Disco Elysium aims to answer. Disco Elysium is a murder mystery RPG in which you play a drunk amnesiac detective trying to piece together who they are while solving a murder. It's set in an isometric point-and-click world in the decaying, corrupt city of Revachol. You can approach the central mystery however you choose. You can kick down doors, interrogate suspects, or just explore the city, and your character can be moulded in whatever way you wish. Now, as a top-line description, that doesn't sound that different, but Disco Elysium is much more than just that. Every choice you make is a swirling battle of emotions inside your character's head, and it uses traditional stat rolls to make decisions in ways that make every choice unpredictable. And having played it for only a brief time, it's already one of my most wanted games of next year. Here are 7 reasons Disco Elysium could be the sleeper hit of 2019.
What kind of cop are you?
No, that's not a metaphor. Each individual skill has a portrait and a character. Your drama skill, for example, is like an unhinged Shakespearean actor. Endurance, meanwhile, can be a bit of a fascist. They exist as party members inside your own head, meaning they'll interject at certain points and push social interactions in directions you weren't expecting. You can level them up as you would any traditional RPG stat, but instead of just getting better at fighting, your character's entire personality will shift in that direction, often with disastrous, hilarious consequences. So, as well as getting better at a certain skill, and I use that term loosely because Disco Elysium is about more than just being good or bad at something, you'll also be learning more about the characters who exist inside your head. Now, I realise that sounds bizarre, but it made perfect sense to me while I was playing it. It's also oddly reminiscent of real-life decision-making. Our mental states are often a compromise, a mix of what you hope you'll be, blended with what your brain allows you to be. So you might aspire to be deeply charming in real life, but competing influences inside your head might derail that, and this is something I noticed everywhere when I was playing.
Hello, officer.
Most detective games don't let you go wrong. You can find none of the evidence, make all the wrong decisions, assign blame to the wrong suspects, and still, somehow, end up solving a crime. Disco Elysium is not like that. You can miss clues, you can die, you can accidentally fail to get properly dressed right at the start of the game, and it all feels amazing. It's a game that embraces the exhilarating randomness of getting stuff wrong. This even extends to your character's build, which might be completely wrong for the way that you want to play. In my case, I created a charismatic hero who wasn't quite charismatic enough. His attempt to woo an attractive stranger, for example, came out as a mangled, expletive-ridden proto-English. But unusually for a video game, trying and failing was actually more fun than succeeding. These organic, interesting twists come from a very procedural place. To achieve difficult things, you have to pass checks against your skills using random dice rolls. You can see how hard each test is and make a call on whether or not you should risk it. And while you can sometimes retake these tests if you fail, you often have to find additional modifiers that let you try again. It encourages you to explore the world and find new ways to progress. I experienced a good example early on, trying to retrieve my detective's horrible tie from a rotating ceiling fan. I decided I could do it without turning the fan off because it would look cool, and it almost killed me. It's a low-key, inconsequential example from right at the start of the game, but it demonstrates how everything in Disco Elysium can lead to a story.
I'm glad to see you here.
Unusually for a game about a hard-boiled detective, you'll often feel like an idiot. In my experience, it's strangely liberating. Depending on which character you choose, you'll come across loads of situations where it's impossible for you to pass the stat test required. You're too weak to kick down a door or too oblivious to spot a clue. And it feels brilliant because you'll learn to love and nurture the skills that you are good at. My detective was a charmless weakling, but was very empathetic, meaning he could often find common emotional ground with the people he met. On the downside, nearly everyone he encountered, from bartenders to ruffian kids, had no respect for his authority. But just because you can't do something in Disco Elysium, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. The open-ended, unpredictable decisions make it feel like playing a pen and paper RPG with a really talented DM. You'll try and do something cool, and maybe it'll work, but it's more likely it'll go horribly wrong and the results will be more interesting. And if you want to, instead of just hiding your failure, you can embrace it. In my case, aided by the flamboyant voice inside my head telling me I was someone special, I decided that I couldn't possibly be a police officer, that instead I had to be a famous rock star. And this throwaway decision, made in front of a bathroom mirror while retching, kept popping back up during loads of interactions. When a colleague in the game asked my name, for example, which obviously I was too drunk to remember, my character made one up on the spot, claiming his name was Raphael Ambrosius Costo. And because my detective was empathetic, I knew that they knew I was talking absolute nonsense. It's something I've never seen in a game before, and it goes far beyond the choice of Paragon Renegade we usually see in most games with moral choices. You're likely to be confronted with situations outside your skill set. You might have to deal with a group of people who, quite realistically, pose a physical threat that you can't circumvent. But one of the most interesting things about Disco Elysium is that there's always another way around. In my case, for example, my detective didn't have the constitution to carry out an autopsy on the murder victim without throwing up, so he had to find ammonia to hide the smell. It didn't work in my case, so I ended up vomiting twice in front of my new partner, but it could have done, and that's what makes the game so intriguing. To this end, combat is totally different too. There's nothing that could be traditionally defined as a combat engine. Instead, violent conflicts are short, direct, and brutal, and your character can die. Encounters are presented as an extension of the dialogue system with unique animations to match. It resembles classic RPGs in that each round begins with the game pausing, allowing characters to make decisions and choose actions. In each round, your party and the inner voices we mentioned above help you make a decision, picking the skill checks that will most likely lead to a positive outcome. And I realise that's a very procedural way of describing what, in my experience of the game, will probably be a very vivid and exhilarating way of presenting combat. I've talked a lot about everything going fabulously wrong and how that makes the game different, but it's not all about failure. With the correct combination of skills, you can and will actually succeed. It's just at the start of the game, you're at your lowest ebb as a human being. By picking the right abilities, exploring all the leads, and being tenacious, Disco Elysium will allow you to become a great cop. But what the developers are trying to achieve is a realistic representation of the mental process of a human being, because being human, as you probably know, isn't always easy. This is why the conflicting skills are so important. You might know you need to do something in real life, but struggle to summon the willpower to do it. Or you might not be able to concentrate on something for more than 10 minutes. Disco Elysium aims to recreate the speed bumps and distractions you experience while trying to do everyday things. It sets the game apart from many other RPGs and demonstrates a level of self-reflection we can only experience in video games. One of the things that really struck me while I was playing was the density of the world. All the characters I met felt like they had their own backstories, from the surly barman to the mysterious gardener. And they all seem to tessellate with your character's skills in different ways. The barman, for example, might be easily intimidated, but he had no time for my character's amateur dramatics. The depth is reflected in the world as well. The autopsy you perform early on is tremendously detailed, even before you've managed to cut the body down from the tree that it hangs from. The vivid descriptions of smells, of reactions and of feelings gives everything the same sense of dreamlike misery you get when you're really horribly hungover. But in a good way.
I was dispatched to handle a strike, not a lynching.
And finally, it's really funny. From the first moments of the game, when you're talking to an ancient lizard brain, deciding whether or not you actually want to return to consciousness, it's clear the script here is unlike anything else. For me, this culminated in the harrowing decision to actually look in the mirror at the start of the game, revealing my awful, damaged, alcohol-ravaged face. Again, dictated by a series of internal monologues, which was also a great way of showing off the game's gorgeous, oil-painted art style. Did I say gorgeous? Well, sort of. Now, I could keep talking about Disco Elysium for another hour, but please do let me know what you think of it so far. Do remember to hit that like button if this has you intrigued, subscribe to Logitech G for more videos, and please remember to hit the notification bell so you know when our next video is going live.